Dear students, hope you have completed the assignment which I have given from first module. I went through some of the assignments and I understand that most of you have written them very well. And to add to those points, I would like to just share a few more points. So, as we saw in the first module that we have some air pollutants, or we saw what was pollution and we began air pollution. So as I told you, what is a pollutant? A pollutant is something that is somewhere in the undesirable concentration. Anything or any matter anywhere in the unwanted time, in the unwanted concentration, in the unwanted matter creates pollution. Now, as I told you, air pollutants are of two types, primary pollutants and secondary pollutants, and they are emitted either directly from a source or they are formed from reactions. So primary pollutants are regularly emitted directly from a source, and those pollutants formed from reactions are secondary pollutants. Now this is only in the case of air pollution. So you can understand that the primary pollutants which are emitted directly are CO, SO2, particulate matter, etc., oxides of nitrogen, etc. Now, formed from reactions, you have an example as ozone. So, all these things were explained earlier, but I just, as a summary, I just give you, a recall. Now, regarding oxides of sulfur as an air pollutant. Now, you know that sulfur has a sharp and nasty smell, and when these oxides of sulfur react with chemicals in the air, it becomes harmful compounds. For example, when oxides of sulfur like SO2 reacts with water vapor in the atmosphere, it acidifies into sulfuric acid, and later on it creates acid rain. It falls into the earth as acid rain, and it will affect the waterways and aquatic life because it will affect the pH. It will acidify the waterways, and as such, living organisms and aquatic life will be affected. Again, acid rain corrodes buildings, as you know. Again, oxides of sulfur, when is taken into lungs by humans, it will create cough, irritation in nose, irritation in throat, etc. Now, in order to prevent all these factors creating pollution, especially air pollution, we have national fuel standards and alternate fuel standards are also, or alternate fuels are also getting promoted these days. For example, now I think the electric cars are coming, and it's an alternate fuel, and it will create less pollution. So these were discussed in the classes. I just give you as a reminder because I couldn't record those classes. Then regarding oxides of nitrogen, hope you have written very well in the assignment, but I would like to say something about it. That is, fossil fuels upon combustion gives oxides of nitrogen. Now, when you think of fossil fuels are generally formed from plants and animals. And their combustion gives oxides of nitrogen. Now, when oxides of nitrogen reach their air, again it will combine with moisture or react with moisture to give nitric acid. And in certain areas or at certain concentrations, they fall back as acid rain. Again, there is another thing that happens with oxides of nitrogen when reaches the air. In summer season, the oxides of nitrogen, when it reaches the air, it forms smoke, SMOG, smoke. And smoke is a brown haze which forms as a cover in air or atmosphere, and it will prevent vision and it will affect the breathing system also. Again, oxides of nitrogen when react with UV rays will form ozone. Now, as you know, at ground level, ozone is a serious pollutant. Again, oxides of nitrogen, ozone and nitric acid, all these things, as you know, when taken in through our nostrils, that is when we breathe, will create lung disease. Now, next is carbon monoxide as an air pollutant. And as you know, carbon monoxide is usually formed from partial burning of carbon. A complete combustion of carbon particle will definitely produce carbon dioxide, but partial combustion will produce carbon monoxide. And the particularity of carbon monoxide is that it can persist in the atmosphere and it can be transported to long distances. So it's usually present in small quantities, though, as you know, this carbon monoxide is generally, is usually present in small quantities because generally carbon monoxide is unstable. So it has a tendency to react with oxygen and form carbon dioxide. As such, they are usually present in small quantities, but partial burning of carbon molecules will produce carbon monoxide. And in addition to that, carbon monoxide is a weak greenhouse gas also. Another thing is that carbon monoxide affects the concentration of other greenhouse gases. That is, other greenhouse gases are methane, ozone, carbon dioxide, etc. Let us see how does carbon monoxide affect the concentration of other greenhouse gases. So, carbon monoxide plus OH radical that is present in the atmosphere. As you know, water vapor is water H2, and when it is ionized, it exists as OH radical and H plus radical. So, carbon monoxide plus OH radical in the atmosphere will increase the concentration of methane. Then another thing is that carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas. So when you breathe it, it will create suffocation. So you have to note that methane, ozone and carbon dioxide are greenhouse gases in addition to carbon monoxide. But carbon monoxide is a weak greenhouse gas. So these were some of the points that I would like that I add to your assignment points. Next is impact of air pollutants. The impact of air pollutants, as you know, air pollutants are there in the air, and we are living on the earth. Plants are there on earth, animals are there on earth. So we all, whatever living organisms are there on the earth, will get affected by air pollutants. So when we say about impact of air pollutants upon humans, it will create asthma first of all. As I told you, it will affect your lungs. It will affect your breathing nostrils. So as such, it has respiratory effects. Then air pollutants we come directly in contact to air pollutants via skin. So it will create skin diseases. Again, lack of oxygen or breathing problems which happens in pregnant ladies due to air pollution will create miscarriages, premature birth, etc. Because the child that is growing inside the mother's womb also requires a lot of oxygen, a lot of pure air, though not directly, but through the mother. Again, the air pollutants can cause cardiovascular disease also. So these are the impact of air pollutants on humans. Again, on plants. Again, as I said, the leaves, the stem, etc. are in direct contact with the pollutants. So they get affected. The crop gets damaged. The toxic effects are there on vegetation. Again, as you saw earlier, the result of oxides of CO, result of oxides of nitrogen, result of oxides of sulfur creates acid rain, and as such this rain falls on the soil. As such the pH changes. So what will happen to the plants that grow on soil? Think about it. Trees get injured. Plant growth gets affected. Again, acid rain damages leaves, plants directly also. So all these impacts are there which will affect plants and humans. Then what about animals? What about other organisms? So regarding them, as you know, acid rain affects water bodies. It will affect aquatic life. An acid rain affects animals directly if they are exposed to those rain. Again, we have to understand that there are some impacts of air pollutant upon the environment. Now, first effect is global warming. You think about environment alone, air pollutants increases the average global temperature by 3 to 8 degrees Celsius in 100 years. And it affects the climate and the plant distribution. As such, it melts the snow caps and increases the sea level. So global warming, as you know, it's an increase in temperature or in average global temperature. This average increase of global temperature is by 3 to 8 degrees Celsius, and it occurs in a span of 100 years. Again, another impact of air pollutants on environment is formation of smoke, as I told you earlier. Now, smoke is formed from hydrocarbons and oxides of nitrogen which react in the presence of sunlight. This smoke creates allergy, affects vision, respiratory disorders, etc. Next is something known as ozone. So ozone is also formed in the air due to air pollutants. Now the pollution at ground level. When ozone is formed, creates respiratory disorders and affects vegetation, as I told you earlier. And the pollutants which are formed from carbon, like hydrocarbons, CFC, depletes ozone at the stratosphere of the atmosphere. So, as I told you, air pollutants are affecting the environment, and when ozone is our subject, the creation of ozone at the ground level is a problem, and the depletion of ozone at the stratosphere, at the upper layer, is also a problem. So these things you have to distinguish. So in the ground level, if ozone is created, it will create a negative impact like respiratory disorders, affecting vegetation, etc. But when ozone is depleted at the stratosphere, it allows entry of UV rays. Now again it is a problem because it will create skin cancer and affect vegetation. Again, another impact of air pollutants on the environment is greenhouse effect. Before I explain greenhouse effect, I would like to say one example. Consider a closed car with closed windows. Now, as you know, when sunlight enters, the infrared rays gets trapped inside the car because of the change in wavelength when the rays enter the car through the glass windows. Similarly, the infrared rays that reach the earth from the sun gets trapped by greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane, and oxides of nitrogen. As you know, infrared rays are heat carriers, and once they are trapped, they will create global warming. When greenhouse gases absorb these infrared rays, what happens to them is that the vibrational modes of these gas molecules get excited, and due to this excitation, the molecules vibrate and causes collision with other molecules and transfer the energy. The electrons are actually getting excited here, and when they return to ground state, they re-emit the energy with a frequency equal to the frequency of the energy gap between the two levels. Due to this, the climate is usually kept warm, and in its absence, the climate would be an average of 60 degrees Fahrenheit colder, and Earth could not sustain life. In short, greenhouse effect has a positive impact in keeping the global temperature almost balanced. Now, regarding air pollution, it affects ecosystems also. The interdependent living organisms in the environment are getting affected due to air pollution. Actually, an ecosystem is an interdependently a system where living beings and living organisms are interdependent between each other and the environment. Now, one of the effects that air pollutants create is acid rain, and it will affect the crops and pH of the soil. So, living organisms that depend on the crop are getting affected because of this. Thus, air pollution affects ecosystem also. Now, in short, this is what is air pollution and the air pollution effects. These are the additional points that I would like to give you apart what you have written from your assignment. Thank you for the time being.